The night Alexandra Grant betrayed Keanu Reeves. The night began quietly, almost too quietly for the weight it would later carry. Los Angeles was alive with the noise of traffic and restless voices, but inside Keanu Reeves's home, the air was calm. He had always lived in silence, a man who preferred the company of books, music, and the small circle of trust he allowed himself. Yet tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be special. Keanu had planned something simple, something that spoke to his heart. Alexandra Grant, the woman he believed had walked beside him through storms of grief and sparks of joy, was coming over for dinner. He had cooked himself carefully with that quiet attention to detail that defined him. He had chosen her favorite wine, set the table with a softness that reflected how much he valued her presence. He was not a man of grand gestures, but when he gave wholly. But as the clock ticked on, his chest began to feel heavier. Alexandra had sent a message hours earlier saying she was on her way, but she never arrived. Minutes stretched into hours. Keanu sat by the window, watching headlights pass by, waiting for the sound of her car. His thoughts began to wander. Had something happened? Was she safe? He called once, twice, 3 times, no answer. Then when the night had settled deep into the city, his phone buzzed. Not with her voice, not with her warmth, but with something else. A friend of his, someone who had always watched out for him quietly, sent him a photo that made the air in his lungs freeze. It was Alexandra. She wasn't in trouble. She wasn't caught in traffic. She was at a crowded art event across town, and she wasn't alone. Keanu's eyes focused on the image. Alexandra stood smiling, her hand on another man's arm. The man leaned close, whispering something in her ear, and she laughed. Not the polite laugh she sometimes offered strangers, but the real laugh. The deep one. The one Keanu thought was his to protect. For a long moment, Keanu didn't move. He felt like the room around him had collapsed, yet he sat frozen in the silence. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with loud words or shattered glass. Sometimes it arrives in an image, in a gesture, in the realization that the one you trusted most had already stepped away without telling you. His first thought wasn't anger, it was sorrow. He remembered the nights they had walked through quiet streets, her hand in his, the way she spoke about dreams and loyalty. He remembered believing that finally, after years of loss, he had found someone who saw him not as a star, not as a shadow of fame, but as a man. But now, everything he believed seemed to slip through his fingers. Still, Keanu did not shout, did not rage. He sat back in his chair, his head in his hands. Humility had always been his shield, kindness his nature. Even now, when his heart was cracking, he whispered to himself, "There must be more to this. There must be a reason." Yet deep inside, he knew. Sometimes betrayal isn't about the act. It's about the choice to hide, the decision to leave someone waiting in silence while giving your laughter to another. Keanu stayed awake until morning, the untouched dinner cold on the table, the candles burned low. His thoughts ran in circles. How could he face Alexandra? What words would come when silence felt heavier than speech? By sunrise, he rose from the chair, exhausted yet steady. He told himself that pain would not break him. Life had tested him before, and he had endured. Respect for himself, resilience in the face of heartbreak, and kindness even toward those who wounded him. These were the truths he clung to. The night Alexandra Grant betrayed Keanu Reeves was not just about betrayal. It was the beginning of a deeper journey, one where he would face his shadows, search for truth, and discover that even in the cracks of a broken heart, light could still shine. And so, the story begins. Atu. The silence after the storm, the next morning arrived with a heavy gray sky, as if the world itself had chosen to mirror the weight in Keanu's chest. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the image returned. Alexandra smiling, her hand on another man's arm. The memory felt sharper than glass. Keanu stood at the window sipping coffee that had gone cold in his hands. He was a man who had faced loss before, who knew how to carry grief without showing it to the world. But this pain felt different. Betrayal wasn't like death. It didn't come suddenly and end sharply. It lingered. It echoed. It questioned everything you thought was real. Hours passed in silence. Keanu replayed their last conversations in his mind. Had there been signs? Moments he had ignored because he wanted to believe in something steady. Alexandra had spoken about trust, about partnership, about walking together. But maybe those words had been smoke. Pretty lines she never meant to live by. And yet part of him refused to judge too quickly. He had always believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. Respect was not something he gave lightly, but once given, he didn't take it back easily. Maybe she had a reason. Maybe the photo was misleading. Maybe the truth was not as dark as it seemed. Still, another voice whispered inside him. The voice of fear. The voice that asked, "What if you have been a fool again? What if your kindness has been mistaken for weakness?" Keanu decided he needed answers. Not rumors, not shadows, but the truth. And only Alexandra could give him that. He picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over her number. But he didn't press call. Not yet. He wanted to face her in person, to look into her eyes and know whether the woman he had trusted was still there. So he waited. That evening, Alexandra finally came. The sound of her car pulling into the driveway made his heart jump. Keanu stepped away from the window, his breath unsteady, his hands trembling though he tried to hide it. The door opened, and there she was, calm, graceful, carrying herself as though nothing had happened. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, but he noticed the hesitation, the flicker of guilt, hidden quickly behind her smile. "I'm sorry I couldn't make it last night," she said lightly, as if her absence had been a simple mistake. "The event ran late. I didn't want to bother you." Her words stung. Bother him? She hadn't even called. Keanu's voice was steady, though his chest burned. "You weren't just at the event. I saw the picture, Alexandra. I saw you." Her smile faltered. Silence fell between them, heavy and sharp. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes shifting away. "Keanu," she began softly. "It wasn't what you think." But her tone lacked the conviction he had hoped for. He searched her face for truth, for the warmth that once reassured him, but all he saw was distance. In that moment, Keanu realized the hardest part of betrayal wasn't the act itself. It was the way it made you doubt every memory, every promise, every moment that once felt safe. Yet even as his heart ached, he chose not to raise his voice. He spoke with the same calm he had always carried. "Then tell me what it is. Tell me the truth. Because I can live with pain, Alexandra, but I can't live with lies." Her eyes filled with tears, but tears are not always proof of innocence. She reached for his hand, but he didn't move. The space between them felt wider than oceans. And in that fragile pause, Keanu understood that his journey had only just begun. Whether Alexandra gave him the truth or not, he would have to face a path of resilience, of rediscovering himself beyond the shadow of betrayal. The silence after the storm was not peace. It was the beginning of a deeper battle between holding on and letting go. The breaking point, the hours after Alexandra's return, stretched long and tense. Her presence in the house felt different, as though a shadow had entered with her. Keanu walked from room to room, quiet, thoughtful, while Alexandra lingered in silence, pretending to read a book, pretending the distance between them was not growing with every breath. That night, the unspoken words filled the air heavier than thunderclouds. Keanu lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his heart torn between love and disappointment. He had always been patient, always willing to wait for people to reveal their truths, but this time felt different. Waiting meant bleeding slowly. In the morning, he made a choice. He asked her to sit down at the table where he had set the dinner she never came home for. The memory of that untouched meal burned in his mind, and he wanted answers before it consumed him. "Alexandra," he said softly, "I've carried pain before. I've lived through grief that nearly broke me. But betrayal is a wound that doesn't heal unless truth is spoken. Tell me, who was he?" Alexandra shifted in her chair, her fingers twisting together. She avoided his eyes, then finally whispered, "He's just someone from the art community. It wasn't serious. It was a mistake." Keanu's chest tightened. The words landed like knives. Mistake. A word so small, yet capable of destroying trust built over years. He didn't raise his voice, but his silence was louder than any shout. "A mistake," he repeated, his tone heavy with sorrow. "Do you understand what that word means to me? To give your trust to someone, to open the deepest part of your life and then to hear it dismissed as a mistake." She tried to reach for his hand again, but he pulled back gently. The pain in his eyes was enough to stop her. Inside, Keanu felt himself breaking. He remembered the way he had believed in her, the way he had defended her when others questioned their bond. He remembered her laughter, her comfort during dark times, the way he thought she had chosen him for who he was, not for the image the world saw, and now all of it was tainted. Yet even in heartbreak, his kindness held him steady. He told her, "I don't hate you, Alexandra. I can't. But I can't pretend that this didn't happen. Trust is not a curtain you can pull back after it's torn." Tears slid down her face, but he turned away. He could not hold her pain while drowning in his own. That evening, Keanu left the house. He walked through the quiet streets of Los Angeles, his head down, his heart heavy. Strangers passed him, unaware of the battle within him. To them, he was Keanu Reeves, the actor, the figure. But inside, he was just a man trying to survive betrayal. He stopped at a small cafe, the kind of place he used to visit when he needed to breathe away from the noise of fame. The owner recognized him but said nothing, offering only a nod of respect. Keanu sat in the corner, sipping tea, watching the world move on while his own world felt frozen. And it was there, in that small cafe, that something inside him shifted. He realized that his journey was not about Alexandra anymore. It was about himself, about finding resilience, about remembering that his worth was not defined by who stayed or who left. The breaking point had come, and with it a choice: to let betrayal harden him into bitterness, or to let it carve him into something stronger, softer, more real. Keanu looked out the window at the fading sun, and though his heart still ached, he whispered to himself, "I will not break. I will rise." The long night of truth, the days that followed, were heavy yet strangely quiet. Alexandra still stayed in the house, moving through the rooms as though nothing had changed, but Keanu could feel the walls between them growing taller each hour. He tried to focus on small routines, watering the plants, reading his books, riding his motorcycle late at night. But the silence between them followed him everywhere. It was on one of those nights, while the city slept, that Keanu found himself sitting in his study, staring at old journals he had kept for years. Inside were words he had written when life felt unbearable, when he had lost people he loved, when grief had swallowed his days. And now, as he read those words, he realized something painful but true. He had always survived, not because the world was kind to him, but because he refused to let bitterness claim him. Still, this betrayal felt different. Alexandra was not just a companion. She had been the one person he had allowed into the quiet corners of his heart. And now those corners felt exposed, vulnerable, raw. Around midnight, he heard her footsteps in the hallway. She stopped at the door of the study, her voice soft, almost trembling. "Keanu, can we talk?" He looked up slowly, his eyes tired but steady. "Talking is all we have left, Alexandra. But only if it is truth. No excuses, no half-answers. Just truth." She stepped into the room, her hands folded against her chest. For a long moment, she said nothing, as if searching for courage. Then she whispered, "I was lonely. I felt like you were drifting away. Always busy, always carrying the weight of the world, and I didn't know where I fit anymore. That night, I let someone else make me feel seen. It was wrong. I know it was. But I can't erase it." Her confession pierced through him. Loneliness, he knew that word too well. It had followed him most of his life. But to hear that she had chosen to escape it, not with patience, not with conversation, but with betrayal, left him shattered. Keanu's voice was calm, but beneath it was pain that could not be hidden. "You wanted to feel seen, Alexandra, and yet, I saw you every day. I gave you my respect, my trust, my heart. If that wasn't enough, then no one will ever be enough." She broke into tears, reaching for him again, but he didn't move closer. He stayed seated, his hands clasped together, his eyes on the floor. The room grew colder with each passing second. It wasn't anger that kept him distant. It was the simple truth that something inside him had already broken. After a long silence, Keanu rose from his chair. He walked past her, pausing at the door. "You say you were lonely. But Alexandra, betrayal doesn't end loneliness. It only creates more of it. Now we are both alone, and it didn't have to be this way." He left her standing there in the study, tears falling silently. That night, Keanu returned to the same cafe where he had found a moment of peace before. The owner nodded at him again, giving him space. He sat in the same corner, staring at the steam rising from his cup. And in that quiet place, surrounded by strangers who asked nothing of him, he whispered to himself, "The truth has been spoken, and though it hurts, it also sets me free." It was the long night of truth, and while his heart was still heavy, he knew he had crossed into a place where healing could finally begin. The path of letting go. The morning after the long night of truth felt strangely still. The house no longer felt like home. Every corner carried memories, and every memory carried weight. Alexandra moved quietly, her eyes red from tears, her steps careful as though she feared every sound might break what little was left between them. Keanu stood by the kitchen counter, staring at a half-finished cup of coffee. He had always believed that love meant patience, that forgiveness was the highest form of kindness. But forgiveness, he now realized, was not something to be forced. It had to rise naturally, and in this moment his heart was not ready. He looked at Alexandra, then said softly, "We can't keep pretending this house is whole when it's filled with cracks. I don't want to hate you. I don't want bitterness between us. But I also can't stay where trust is broken." She closed her eyes, her face pale. "Are you saying it's over?" He didn't answer quickly. Instead, he took a deep breath, as if gathering years of resilience into one moment. "I'm saying we need to let go. Maybe letting go is not the end. Maybe it's the only way to save whatever respect we have left." Her tears fell again, but this time she did not argue. Deep down, she knew the truth he spoke. Betrayal had changed them both, and no amount of apologies could turn back the clock. That afternoon, Keanu packed a small bag. Not much, just a few clothes, a book, his motorcycle keys. He needed space. Needed to breathe away from the walls that reminded him of broken promises. As he zipped the bag, Alexandra stood at the doorway, watching silently. "Where will you go?" she asked. He looked at her, his eyes kind but distant. "I don't know yet. Maybe nowhere. Maybe everywhere. I just know I need to find myself again." And with that, he left. The road became his companion. He rode through long stretches of California highways, the wind pushing against him, the sound of the engine steady in his ears. There was freedom in the open road, a freedom that whispered of healing. Each mile carried him further from the pain, yet closer to a truth he had always known. Resilience was not about forgetting the wound, but about learning to live with it and still choosing kindness. Days passed. He stopped in small towns, ate in quiet diners, spoke with strangers who knew him only as a man, not a star. He listened to their stories. Stories of love, of loss, of survival. In their voices he found a reflection of his own journey. Everyone carried pain, but everyone also carried strength. One evening he sat on a wooden bench overlooking the ocean. The sky was painted with fire as the sun sank low. For the first time since the betrayal, he felt something shift inside him. Not joy, not yet, but peace. He whispered to the horizon, "Letting go doesn't mean I stop caring. It means I choose myself too." The path of letting go was not simple. It hurt with every step, but Keanu knew he was walking toward something stronger, toward a life where betrayal did not define him, but where resilience, respect, and humility shaped who he continued to be. The rise from ashes weeks turned into months, and the sharpness of betrayal softened into something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acceptance. Keanu had learned through his travels, through the faces of strangers, through long, quiet nights on the road, that pain was not a cage, it could also be a teacher. He returned to Los Angeles when the season began to change. The air was cooler, the leaves falling in the city parks. His house felt emptier than before, yet in that emptiness there was also space for renewal. Alexandra was gone. She had moved out quietly, leaving behind only a letter on the kitchen table. He read it once, her words filled with apology, regret, and hope that one day he might forgive. He folded the letter carefully, placed it in a drawer, and let silence close it. In the following days, Keanu began to rebuild himself piece by piece. He focused on small acts of life, cooking simple meals, repairing things around the house, walking in the park, talking with neighbors. He realized healing was not a single moment of clarity, but a series of quiet steps taken every day. Still, the world noticed. Journalists whispered. Rumors spread. Yet Keanu remained calm. When asked about his private life, he answered with humility. "Life tests us all," he said softly in one interview. "But kindness is the only way to survive it." His words traveled further than he imagined, touching people who had carried their own betrayals, inspiring them to rise without hate. One evening, he attended a charity event for children in need. As he stood on stage speaking about resilience and hope, the crowd listened in silence. His voice was steady, his presence calm, but those who looked closer could see the depth in his eyes. He was not speaking as an actor, not as a star, but as a man who had walked through fire and still chosen to love the world. After the event, a young woman approached him. She held his hand with trembling fingers and whispered, "Your words saved me. I thought betrayal had ended my life, but now I see it can be a beginning." Keanu smiled gently, his heart touched. In her reflection, he saw his own journey. He had risen not just for himself, but for others who needed to see that pain could transform into strength. That night, as he drove home, the city lights glowing around him, he felt something new. Gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons, for the resilience that had carried him, for the kindness that had not left him even in his darkest hours. He stood on his balcony, looking at the stars, and whispered, "Betrayal tried to break me, but it only shaped me into someone stronger. I am not defined by who left, but by how I choose to live." The night Alexandra Grant betrayed Keanu Reeves had once felt like the end, but now it was clear. It had been the beginning of his rise from ashes. A story not of loss, but of rebirth. A reminder that even when the heart is wounded, love, respect, and kindness can still light the way forward.